Good morning and welcome back to Morning Express. We're glad you're watching on this last day of April. It is time for State of the Nation. And this morning, as we've been telling you all the while for the last 1 hour, we're focusing on the Okoa Kenya bill. It was launched last week and the push continues to change the constitution. And we'll look at some of the elements of it. So there's some controversial areas and some that have seen even voices across the political divide say, yeah, perhaps something needs to happen there. But we'll hear from our guests this morning. But as you follow the debate, we'd also like to hear from you. You can tweet at Sophia Wanuna. You can SMS 22155 on your thoughts on the Okoa Kenya bill. Of course, the Coalition for Reforms and Democracy is behind that. And to introduce my panel to you this morning that we're going to engage with over this bill, Kamodo Waiganja, who's a commissioner with the Commission of the Implementation of the Constitution, Maura Chege, who's an MCA, Ngara Ward, Casper Setemba, he's a Director of Legislative Affairs at the Office of the Deputy President. Also with us is Senator Makueni County, Mutula Kilonzo Jr.
Good morning.
Good morning, and thank you all for joining us. Mutula, I'll begin with you on this Okoa bill. It has taken a while since we first started hearing about the push, then we went to collection of signatures, and it was what, about 1 million?
Yes.
This 1 million took a couple of months. Was it hard to get these signatures or what?
It wasn't difficult. It's just the you needed to coordinate, you needed to collate, and therefore it's not a lot of time to collect 1 million signatures. There was obviously some element of delay in the books being returned, but otherwise I don't think we delayed.
Okay.
Yes.
So all in good time?
All in good time. I mean, this could not have been done at a better time.
Yes.
As far as I'm concerned, we are 2 years after the elections. We are another 2 years to the next elections. So if you were to put it in percentage form, you are 50% into the implementation of the new constitution.
All right.
And therefore, this ideally is the moment where you should sit, look back and look forward and see whether this is the right time to start looking at these things before the next general elections.
All right, let's get into some of those issues. Of course, land reforms is one of the areas the Okoa bill is touching on, and to empower the National Land Commission. The country has been treated to, we would call them shenanigans,
Charade. Charade.
A charade between the ministry and the NLC. The president intervened. They promised to bury the hatchet. That appears not to have happened. The issue has been to the Supreme Court, but still the push and pull continues. Waiganjo, as the CIC, and looking at the law as it states and stands right now, and what the efforts have gone to clarify positions and as far as mandate, do we need to go to a referendum to be able to finally put an end to all of this drama?
Thanks, Sophia. And I think that's probably the place to start. Because we obviously have challenges in our institutional setups, we have challenges in the law, we have challenges in our administrative processes. I think the question we need to ask is whether our first stop is a constitutional amendment. And that's not to say that a constitutional amendment is illegal, is unlawful, is unconstitutional. It is to say that whereas the Constitution affirms the need for its amendment, even if you look at the language of the amendment, it is supposed to be a very, those issues that are very high threshold, those issues which we have no other possibility of resolution other than the Constitution. Our concern has been that if you look at many of the proposals that have been made, and we can deal with the land one specifically,
yes,
a lot of those issues are actually resolvable by law. And in fact, for me, the disappointment has been that whereas one recognizes a lot of energy being put in the Okoa Kenya referendum, and that is only legitimate, you don't sense the same energy, particularly from parliamentarians, including Honorable Mutula, in terms of putting the energy to ensure at least we have cleared all the legislative landmines so that we then sit down and say, actually, these ones cannot be resolved other than by resolution. And I can give you 10 examples in that Okoa bill, which could actually have been resolved purely by amendments in the law. And I think we need to do that, because if we don't do that, what it will mean is that the sanctity of our Constitution, and it is not the Bible, it can be amended.
Correct.
The sanctity of the Constitution is going to be lost at some point, and there won't be a difference between the Constitution and any other law.
Yeah.
And I think we need to be very, very careful that we only take those issues for referendum change, that we must change by of referendum.
All right, Sitemba, let me bring you in, because some would argue that this issue on land must be taken to a referendum. It has gone through, the court process, legal process, to the level of the Supreme Court, the highest court in the land. So then it appears all systems are not working, and maybe that changes what is needed.
I think I'll just say basically that what Kamolo again just said, that these issues can be sorted at a legislative level. I mean, if you say that you need a referendum for us to be able to sort our messes, for example, that you have to entrench this in the Constitution, then basically you're saying that our courts are not able to resolve some of this dispute, that they're not able to implement the law. I think some of those issues were basically administrative, and it's up to the individual people who are in those offices to be able to basically implement the law as it's supposed to be, and to take responsibility for some of the failures in those offices. I don't think it's really an issue that we have to take to a referendum, which, by the way, is very costly. It's going to cost us almost 8 billion. I mean, is that where we want to take the country at this time?
I imagine you disagree, because he sounds optimistic that this can still be sorted out, but going by what we've seen so far, all seems to have failed.
Let me tell you, it's fair the public understands how this process is going to work, so that by the time you get to the referendum, we understand that a referendum is put in the Constitution as a default clause, because there are some certain chapters in the Constitution that are protected, so that they can only be amended by referendum, and those are the ones that are in this particular draft. This draft will have to go to the county assemblies, which will have to approve 24 of them, minimum. This draft will have to go to the National Assembly. This draft will have to come to the Senate. It is upon default of all those institutions in amending this law. I would be happy if the Jubilee government, through your office, would say we accept at least 3 of them, so that we take one to the referendum. So that I agree with the principles enunciated here, that some of these issues can be resolved through the amendment without going into a referendum. So if you want to save 8 billion, write an advisory opinion to the tyranny of numbers through and let's start making progress in the National Assembly.
All right.
Because as far as I'm concerned, and the principle of going to the referendum is found in Article 1, where we, the members of Parliament, exercise the sovereignty of the people of Kenya on their behalf. It is when we fail that the people of Kenya will have to make a decision as to whether these factors or these things we have raised concern them, and whether they should be amended. And let me tell you, if you go to Makueni County and ask them whether they need more funds, what do you think they're going to say? Do you think they will say no? So I'm challenging members of Parliament, and particularly the ruling coalition. Some of the issues that are here affect the people who elected them. And therefore, in the question as to whether they need more resources, if you take it to the public, I can tell you, it's going to be a straight yes.
Let me first bring in Maura. He has not spoken yet. Maura, you're part of the County Assembly's Forum, beginning, and we'll go issue by issue because there's quite a number of them. We may not be able to finish it all, but on land, are you in agreement that this, as a County Assembly's Forum, will you be rallying your members to support this kind of changes when it comes to land?
Thank you. From the County Assemblies Forum, we actually also did our own review, and we even invited Okoa, and we also invited at that time Pesa Mashinani, which died steam at some point. But we have a raft of positions, which also include land, and mostly on the independence of assemblies, in the structures of government and all that. And unfortunately, we were not able to pass it to the governing council and to the whole membership, so I can't present it as a position yet. But as discussions proceed, we'll be able to have a solid position that can be said to be the assemblies. But even as things are happening and the processes are going on, of course, there are issues that need to be relooked at, especially when it comes to the funding of our county governments. And intertwined with now the politics of the day, it's going to be it's going to be messy at some point.
Sophia, let me tell you the crude joke on the people of Kenya, by parliamentarians particularly. Right now, as we speak, there are 3 amendment bills on the Land Acts, which is part of what has brought the confusion in the land sector. there is nobody investing in that legislation to clean up the land sector. You have amendments that are proposed to the National Land Commission bill to ensure that you clean up the sector. Instead of concentrating there, and I agree, I mean, Jubilee has a responsibility, being the majority party in parliament, but surely you expect that CORD itself, because it is committed to those issues, is even willing to take them to the people of Kenya in a referendum, would have sponsored laws, would be on the forefront, and say like they did on the security laws, that we tried, we have failed, we now have to go to the people. What I find unfortunate is that instead of carrying out the responsibility that the people of Kenya gave us to resolve issues by law, we want to go back to them and take what is essentially a very divisive process. And Sophia, let's not forget something. If you go through this country, Mutula, no, let me just finish. When you go through this country, the one document that that unites the whole country is the Constitution. We may disagree on many other things. We don't agree on the leadership. We're divided even on our nationality.
But you're suggesting we should never
but listen,
amend it, because then if
so for that reason, as much as possible, if we are going to amend the Constitution, let us try to the fullest as possible a consensus process. You know why? If we don't do that, what we will find, we will have a constitution that is acceptable. One side of the country is unacceptable. That is not good. That is not say we can't do it.
Yeah.
But let us do it when all other efforts are failed. And I can go to revenue. These members of parliament and the Senate have agreed together this year to only give 237. All of them. I did not hear that the CORD coalition demanded an extra 100 billion shillings. No, it is true. No, it is true.
Mislead the public.
No, it is true. Those things are in the Hansard.
Sophia, this gentleman is misleading the public.
Pull out the Hansard, Mutula.
National Assembly agreed to pass on 258 billion to the counties.
You added 7 billion.
We added 7 billion.
Yes.
Is that an agreement?
No, I'm just saying.
Now there's a mediation.
You are asking in this bill for an extra 200 billion. That is what this bill will do.
What do you mean? In terms of the 45?
In terms of the 45. So I'm just saying. Okay. I'm just saying.
Listen, the fact of the matter is that the dispute we are having is that if you look at the budget today, the division of revenue, the money that the national government is keeping, and I expect the CIC to be advising the country, because that's why we have the CIC. Their work is not to issue statements like they do. The fact is that if you look at the division of revenue as it is now,
yes,
at the current figures, we are at 33%. The money that the national government is keeping, which is supposed to go for county functions, would not even require an amendment. It would go to 45%. But you know, because the Jubilee coalition is keen every time we do a division of revenue to say, you know, by the way, country, and the president makes a statement, we have now done 33, as if we are supposed to clap.
Before we move away on land, before we go back to the money, I want to ask one more question to you, Sitemba, because on one hand, your last statement there was that referendum would be costly.
Yes.
So cognizant of that, why then are you not rallying your troops? Because you have the numbers to make the changes that Kamodo here is talking about to avoid this kind of a process.
I think the process to implement the Constitution is an ongoing process, and we have all the constitutional deadlines. And our members in Parliament have been very committed to this process in terms of amending and implementing all the laws. I mean,
by the way, on this one, Jubilee and CORD are all guilty. The reality is that they have not been consistent.
But back to this Okoa referendum bill. I think this CORD bill is basically they're flip-floppers. They're inconsistent. In February, the CORD party leader said when the High Court ruled on the bill for what was it called? When the
division of revenue?
No, on CDF. When the court ruled and said that CDF is unconstitutional, the first person to come out and support the court and said, in fact, it's anti-devolution to have CDF. Let's not have it at all. And then what do we see in this referendum bill? CDF. They're introducing CDF through another sort of backdoor. So the question is this, I mean, are you really keen on a referendum to address the issues in this country, or are you really just throwing sweeteners to ensure that this bill passes? So set the step for 2017. I think the flip-flopping.
Yes, the narrative of the government is that this is a platform to launch your 2017 campaign.
Let me tell you, you can't talk about CDF like that. Your members of parliament will eat you for lunch and supper. Let me tell you, the fact is that the proposal here, and the court said that the CDF is not factored in terms of the devolution and how money should be devolved to counties. What they said is that if CDF is to be in place, it must be constitutional, it must have an act of parliament. And that is what is proposed here.
All
the
right.
CDF is not introduced.
Have you changed?
What you're saying is that if CDF is to remain as a function of the members of the National Assembly, there must be an act of parliament that is aligned to those functions. Because the functions of national government, because CDF is not performing county functions.
Have you changed your mind from February to now that in February
we agree with the court.
CDF,
we have not changed
now
our
you're saying
we have not changed
CDF.
our
Why
mind.
the flip-flop?
Yes,
It's not a flip-flop.
What is it?
The court has said if CDF must remain in our laws, it must be aligned to the Constitution. What is the contradiction in now saying
the contradiction is that in February the party leader did not support the court's ruling. He said that having CDF is anti-devolution and that all the
So
money
now it has all of a sudden aligned to
yes, that all the money should be channeled through the county government
as
opposed
now,
to the members of parliament.
It is anti-devolution.
All right, semantics here. Semantics.
That's why I said a lot of this is a crude joke on the people of Kenya. Because, again, there's a reason why the court said the CDF is unconstitutional. It wasn't just that it is not in the Constitution, but you can just put it there. It is because it offends constitutional principles. It offends the separation of powers. You're giving the National Assembly responsibility of implementation. That is not their business. Okoa, to buy the members of parliament is actually just putting it in, and it will continue to offend that principle. It offends the planning process because the county government is an implementing organ. It plans in a particular, then CDF is come and supplemented. You still have not resolved that issue. What we are saying is this. I think there are legitimate reasons to have changes to the Constitution. Let us do them in the processes that the Constitution itself allows them that at this point. If we must, let us amend the Constitution. But for members of parliament to refuse their responsibilities given by the Constitution, to refuse to amend the law, I mean, Sophia, we have a problem right now. I've seen in one of the proposals in the bill is to devolve some extra function to the counties. Excellent proposal. But in the meantime, members of parliament, the one for education, for education, some part of education.
Isn't there.
The same members of parliament have refused to devolve functions that are already in the Constitution. On roads, they have refused. So that's why I'm saying it is cynical, it is a joke on the people of Kenya, and the Constitution is not expensive just in terms of money. Money we can pay, 8 billion, we are a 1 trillion shilling economy. It is the social and political cost of this process, which any leader must warn themselves.
All right, before we move away from money, Maura, let me bring you in on, the government argues we've increased allocations to the counties, even with the threshold standing very low. Okoa bill says, yes.
It's a minimum, please.
Okoa bill says they want to raise that threshold, they want it entrenched in the Constitution, so that then it's not dependent on the whims of whoever is in power. What do you say to that?
Well, even when you look at the 45% threshold that is now being discussed, our position, or probably, I would be asking, what's the magical arrival at 45%? Why not 60? Why not 30? That is one of the issues we need to look at. And then secondly, what other processes can the government and the current opposition be pushing for? Because once it gets to our place, of course they'll be looking for 24 counties, and it will be outrightly political. And then and it's going to happen, and however much we would want to have a position as assemblies, it is going to end up being who is for CORD and who is for Jubilee. And that kind of rallying and the push and shove that comes out with the divisions and whatever that characterizes elections will actually happen, because a referendum is essentially an election.
But Maura, you agree with me that the assemblies, the members of parliament, National Assembly and Senate, can arrive at a minimum reforms acceptable before we go to the referendum. The 45% can be subjected to a referendum, in which case, therefore, the mathematics and the costing of functions, which the CIC should have been advising. In fact, the CIC has been spending more time issuing statements.
No, let's not assess institutions, because the Senate is ashamed. Let us talk about the issues on the table today.
Let's focus.
If you want to discuss
CIC
is on trial. I'm telling you, because
that's okay.
Instead of advising,
but we're not trying CIC
so please deal with the issues.
I must, because CIC
come
is a
here, we discuss CIC.
Instead, and I'm now going to the land reform.
We're not going to go back. We need to move.
But I want to finish.
Briefly.
Instead of asking Gilu to resign, like the chair is famous for saying, they should have then said, what is the minimum that must be done in
the bills are before the House, my friend.
In order to plug this gap that is there in the
We are not going to move to CIC.
Sophia, the bills, you know, just for that point, as a commission, we have held 27 meetings with these institutions, including with the Senate. We have proposed 3 amendment bills. They are before them. So when you say CIC is not working, just issuing statements, it's a nice political statement, but it is not helpful to this discussion.
Briefly.
Yes. On the vision of revenue, just what I want to say is this. Of course, as a country, we all want more development at the grassroots. That's agreed. But I don't think we need a referendum for this. I mean, division of revenue at a first level is negotiated between national and country level at the Intergovernmental Budget and Economic Council. Yes. And this has seen the progressive increase in resources allocated to the county from 15 to about 33-35% right now. Question is, and the point that we want to make is this, that let this process continue. Maybe one day we'll reach that 45%, because what they're proposing is a blanket figure, 45%, but they're not telling us, are we amending the 4th schedule to increase more functions to the counties? They're not speaking to that. I think it's very dishonest.
Speak to us on that.
It's not a question of dishonesty.
Okay.
I want to, in fact, the position taken by IBEC, in which the Deputy President chairs, for me, it's unconstitutional, because they have been attempting to circumvent the Senate in the negotiation on division of revenue. And they sit on a table together with governors and CRA and attempt to arrive at this 33% that makes them sleep well at night. We don't want that. We are not interested in it. The fact is that when you look at the functions under Schedule 4, those functions are not funded. The Constitution says you devolve a function 187, you follow it with resource. We have been talking about dams that are being done by NYS, in which they have been given 11 billion shillings. Okay. Those functions are county functions. If that 11 billion shillings was at county level today, we will be now at 40%.
So more money, but not more functions.
Yes. Now look at Narok, for example. They are having disasters. We have been telling the National Assembly that the emergency funds for dealing with crises like the one you have in Narok, Makueni, where people are now displaced, that money should go to counties. The national government is insisting that it must keep the money at Treasury. And that is what IBEC has been negotiating. If the 4 billion shillings that is under emergency under the division of revenue, and the 6 billion shillings or 11 billion shillings under NYS was at county, would be at 42%. Division of revenue.
You know, let me make 2 questions again. I think the issue is not whether or not the counties need more money. I think the reality is that we have not devolved the amount of funds that we should have given. That is a reality. Okay. The question is who's responsible. You know, we moved, and I think we still have a move from the mindset of the old constitution, where the Treasury and the national government decided which money is devolved. The National Assembly and the Senate are the ones who decide which money goes. The Senate last year, at least this year, they've added some 7 billion. Again, by consensus, agreed on the 228 billion. You know, even though, it is true, it is there. Last year,
we didn't agree.
They did. You did. You passed. That is why you passed.
Okay. Anyway, I sit in the Senate. This gentleman doesn't sit in the Senate.
No, we see the
I was in a mediation committee.
So anyway,
Senator Mutula,
let him finish.
Can I finish my argument?
But don't say we agree.
You can respond. The reality is that by consensus, the 2 houses have consistently denied the counties sufficient funds. It is irresponsible for them to now come and tell the people, give us more money. The other issue is, Sophia, is that if you look at the proposal on the 45% of revenue, have we also asked ourselves the question whether even this figure is also not reckless? And I'll give you the reason why. You know, sometimes we look at 1 billion shillings and we think there's a lot of money available. The truth of the matter is, as a country, we have committed ourselves to debt. And by the way, that is where the IBEC process helps, because those numbers are there. We pay 320 billion shillings or thereabouts in debt. We pay salaries about another 4, which you must pay another 4. So the amount of money available for distribution, Mutula, is not the 1 billion. And I think we must hear from proposals that are reckless.
All right. I think I'll have a showdown between the 2 of you.
We don't agree.
The bigger problem when it comes to especially the county allocations is the money for development.
Yes.
And I think if we were able to segregate and know this is the out of the 258 billion, this is the money that is for development, and it can be ring-fenced in some way or some law.
And that can be done in law.
Yeah, so that now we actually question the counties, why are you not implementing this amount in this kind of development? I think that could be a better discussion as opposed to having all this blanket money that probably 3/4 or 4/5 of it goes to recurrent, and then you are fighting the counties that they're not giving out the money.
Please, the Senate has already, through the CRA recommendations, provided for ceilings. This money is now ring-fenced. You guys are still somewhere behind in news. The fact is, let me tell you,
the ceilings are for the assemblies and not for development.
The ceilings are on recurrent expense at county government and county assembly, so that you ring-fence the development at 40%.
All right.
That is already in the law.
And that's what we should be
get into the
about.
program, my friend. Let me tell you.
That's what
It's a fact. It's a fact.
All right,
and this financial year, the ceilings are going to continue.
All right, let's cross to electoral reforms again, an issue that's in the draft Okoa bill. And one of the things that stands out here, that the Constitution of Kenya is amended by introducing a new Article 86B as follows. Roman 1, the system of voter identification shall be electronic. So this in essence completely puts out, if electronic technology fails, then no election? Is that in essence what this says? Because it says the system of voter identification shall be electronic. So if systems fail, what
happens? Registration. Remember,
it says voter identification.
This is what transpired, and if you read the Supreme Court infamous ruling on the petition, the Supreme Court was of a view that it wasn't clear whether you can have both, and in fact attempted to say that the manual system was always the best system. The Elections Act, the way it is now, suggests that electronic and manual can be used. You are just trying to remove the ambiguity. No. You can't have an ambiguity where the Supreme Court says that the word may in the Act gives them room. If one fails, you resort to the other one. And these systems of electronic, and that is the reason why at the Supreme Court level, you have a green book. And we have said this, that Kriegler said you can't have a black book. And therefore, you cannot change the cover and now make it green, and in the next election, we have it yellow. That system, we must remove the system where the default is an old system which you do not want, which is
why not manual. Have both entrenched in the Constitution? Why then have simply electronic? If electronic fails,
manual has never worked. The reason we have had problems is because it's manual.
For me, I think is not being very straightforward with us on the amendment they're proposing. That amendment, what they're simply saying is this, that voter identification shall be electronic, and that only electronically identified voters can vote. So if the system fails, what they're basically saying, if this amendment was to go through, is no election. And these are the preposterous amendments we're really saying that these guys are not being honest about.
My election was done electronically. Everything.
That's a by-election. Talking about a general election, that the dynamics are, of course, very different.
Between March and July 2013, it's not like we imported new machines. But my election, by 9 p.m. on 26th of July, there was a result. I voted using
You cannot compare a one by-election with a general election that has multiple positions.
I'm talking about a system. Madam, please allow
me. We're talking about a system, but that system, one has so many demands on it, from presidential to senator to gubernatorial race.
What are you talking about? India has got more people. I think China has got more people.
Let's hear from
I mean, we are only 14 million.
I think in an ideal world, by the way, I would agree that an electronic system would be ideal.
Yes.
I think the danger of, and which is why some of these things you need them in the law. The problem that if you entrench it in the Constitution and technology fails, by the way, technology is open to compromise also, Mutuala, and So let's also not assume that
even
the end all and is electronic, but it's probably a more safer system than the manual system. On that I would agree. The question again for me is these are some of the things you can actually put in the Elections Act, and they would be.
We can agree.
But
that's
of course,
what we're telling them to agree.
At least I would hope by now I'd have wanted to see that code. Even if it's more numbers, at least it's pushing the bill but has failed. I haven't seen the proposal. Because it would be good at least to try that and say, we have failed, let's do a referendum. But let us also remember that in Nigeria just the other day, and it wasn't about compromise, the electronic system sometimes failed. And what is a fallback? So we also need not to assume that the solution is electronics. Things can't go wrong, and we need a fallback.
In Nigeria,
and we can only say that in the extreme circumstances where that fails, and you can create a process. But you can't say absolutely it's only electronic. In any case, it's a system. And by the way, the problem in Kenya election is not about systems.
It's people.
It's about people. So if you're not going to change the people, even if you put the systems, they can be open to abuse.
All right. Talking of changing the people. Speaking of changing the people, let me read this to you. I want to hear your thoughts, Casper. That the commissioners shall elect a chairperson from among their number, and no member of the commission shall hold the position of chairperson for a period exceeding 12 months, meaning you're having rotational chairperson.
I read that proposal, and I thought these guys are being very ambitious. Number one, they're saying that political parties should nominate members to this commission, and then we still want to call this commission independent. How independent is it? If the party bosses are the ones appointing these commissioners will be beholden to them. They'll be serving their individual interests as opposing to serving the needs of Kenyans, which is a fair and transparent electoral process. I think that is the most preposterous. If you look at the way the other commissioners were appointed, it was Kibaki and Raila who appointed them. They were leaders of the various political parties. Then what happened? I don't think we should go that way. I think we need an independent commission that can deliver free and fair and transparent.
How will they be appointed?
Maura,
Educators, what do you think will be the best?
Maura, your thoughts on this, the commissioners?
For me, I think that there should be some political parties, because all these shenanigans and the thuggery happens in the primaries.
Yes.
And we cannot expect...
Nomination.
Yeah, it's true. The nomination process to be a sham, and then now push the Electoral Commission to perform miracles on top of it. Because most of the parties have big challenges when it comes to doing their primary processes. So I think that discussion needs to be the one that is being discussed, as opposed to rushing now to the public to make all these amendments on top of here before we do it in our individual parties.
Actually, what we're saying is some of those proposals they have are good. You know, having a single national voter register, but let's do that in an act of parliament, as opposed to telling Kenyans, wake up, go to a referendum, let's spend 8 billion for something that can be sorted out.
And it's your members in both houses that would make it happen. So perhaps you need to have a meeting with them after this and tell them to...
There's another, just in the electoral reforms, another preposterous proposal by COD. They want the commission to do civic education for them. I mean, they're saying that the commission shall ensure that not less than 80% of eligible voters are registered. So this is just a response to the failures of the COD party in the last election, whereby they failed in their regions to do civic education and get enough people to register as voters. You cannot force someone to go register as a voter and to go vote.
Okay,
no, that's
respond to those two, and let's begin with how you see the rotational chair position in the IEBC as helping the country move forward in as far as the elections, the sanctity of the vote being protected. And number two, what he raises, that's 80% of registering.
Let's agree that we have a problem in this country about registration of voters. Let me speak about my own country. I don't know about this gentleman. He doesn't have statistics. In Boni constituency, for example, the people who passed on between 2013 and 2014 are more than the people who registered. And the whole county has got 1,000 people registered in 6 constituencies. We have a problem. And the problem is that we have not educated people on the value of participating in elections. It's not by force, but it's good that they register. There are some republics where, in fact, voting is made mandatory and default becomes an offense. We are moving to that area where we are telling people that let them register because it's good for them. The question of rotation of chairman is so that you do not have a person who feels they have become king simply because they become a chairman. The word rotation means that you don't impose so much power on Isaac Hassan, for example, who then sweats it out before announcing. The fact is, there's something that is mentioned. My own view, personal view, is that the idea of putting political parties in the nomination of commissioners is how we bungled the election in 2007, is how we bungled the election in 2013, and we'll continue doing so. Because for some, we must go back to where we have commissioners who are appointed independently of political parties. And those are things the Judge Billy administration, who is a beneficiary of some of these systems, should be able to champion by saying, let us change this system, because the system of appointing commissioners, because they are beholden to their regions, because they are beholden to their counties.
And they will not be beholden to the parties?
Sorry?
And they will not be beholden to the parties now?
You can have a system, because it's, I mean, Kenya is not an island. This has been tried in many other places.
Okay.
All you need to do is sort of ring fence the persons who are appointed, so that you don't have the situation like EACC, which is part of our recommendations, where you wake up today and tomorrow they are not there.
All right, Kamada, let me hear your thoughts on this one. That the commission shall ensure in respect of each constituency, not less than 80% of the eligible voters in any electoral area are registered based on the last population census of the government. Should we be putting this responsibility on the IEBC?
I think the reality is that, again, anyway, the truth, I mean, listen, if we're talking about, please let's be serious. If we're talking about constitutional amendment, let's be serious. I mean, to say that the commission will ensure, the most that the commission can do is provide facilities for people to register. Minimum.
That's why it's called ensure.
Instead of calling,
not force.
Yeah, you can't force people.
It's called
ensure. To ensure.
Well,
There's something called promote, you know,
yes.
or you can facilitate. You can facilitate the infrastructure, but you cannot ensure registration. So that's what I'm saying about, it's not serious. It's a very, it's a populist bill in some respects. There's some, but then there's some provisions that are very good. The problem is whether that is where they should be found. Number two is this. On the issue of the appointment of electoral commissioners, the Constitution actually does not prescribe the process. It just says that you shall have independent commission of the IEBC. It is the responsibility of Parliament to enact a process that creates independent commissioners. Now, the tyranny of numbers is a very convenient excuse by COD. What we want to see, and that's why I said I was very impressed by the energy they put in the security laws, notwithstanding the tyranny of numbers. You definitely spoke to the people of Kenya, you are unhappy. Why are we not seeing the same movement on the electoral laws? Those things you're pushing in the referendum. I'd have wanted to see a bill by COD, which Jubilee has voted down. And then you say now we're helpless, we have to go to the people of Kenya. That is the process we want to see on electoral reforms. A lot of those amendments being proposed are actually pure amendments of the Political Parties Act and the Elections Act. Yes. Let's do that. If we fail, Mutula, I would be the first one to support saying let's amend the Constitution. But it is wrong on the people of Kenya to take us on a process of dividing us on the Constitution on an issue which can be resolved otherwise.
But please agree with me that we have got the country thinking. COD has gotten the country thinking. Thinking means that it is your work to speak to your member of parliament. It is your work to speak to your member of parliament, and it is my work to speak to...
So you then saying you're not serious, you just want to get people thinking?
No, that's all right. This is a draft, madam. This is a draft.
So to just get us thinking.
It's a draft that will be subjected to the public. It means that the public will only get involved when the members of parliament fail to agree. So therefore, we must tell the public, so that the public doesn't go home thinking today that, oh my goodness, that 8 billion shillings would have given us water, or alternatively something has failed.
Okay,
the fact is that you have a constitutional amendment process that we all voted for. And that constitutional amendment process, in cases where, particularly on devolution and other chapters, it provides for a method of amendment. So therefore, if we can build consensus around the 5 or 6 issues, including inclusivity, including electoral,
we'll get to that shortly,
EACC, and then leave 1 or 2 issues to subject to the public, I'm happy.
And that's excellent to hear from Mutula. So that then means, Mutula, then you have a problem, because you have collected 1 million signatures in support of a bill. Now, which means you have 1 million signatures, but you're saying this is actually not the bill. It could be amended, it could be changed. Which means you'll have to go back and collect 1 million signatures? Or is that a front on the million people who have signed on to this?
Come on, stop misleading the public.
No, the Constitution, we can pull out the Constitution and say you collect 1 million signatures on a proposal.
Yes.
That is a proposal.
The fact, of course, it's a proposal. This is
which on which you have collected 1 million signatures.
This is the proposal.
In essence, you can't really amend what is in this bill.
No, the fact is that this bill will go to the National Assembly and will come to the Senate. Are you saying that when it lands in both houses, it cannot be amended? That is what I am talking about.
No, what you have said, what I have understood you to say, maybe I had you wrong, is that
maybe
you want a conversation. I probably did, and I'd be very happy for you. So what you are saying is this bill as is including the ridiculous provisions, is what you're going to take to the National Assembly, which means that the National Assembly...
You can't abuse us in the process of calling us ridiculous.
No,
please.
not you. It is the proposals. It is
all right,
the proposals are ridiculous. They can't be called anything else.
All
Some
right,
of them are very solid.
Just
but
be
without
gentlemen.
After the draft bill that has been done now, I think the process now is to take it to the
county assemblies
and take it to the county assemblies. Now the question should be, can it be amended at the counties?
It can't be.
It can't be. Yeah. Can it be amended at the National Assembly?
It can't be.
Then from that's a process that becomes the referendum.
This is what we have.
So what do you say?
So honestly, the discussion should be happening before it goes to the IBC.
So on one hand, you said that you wanted to get Kenyans thinking. So that is what they're challenging you to. So you're getting Kenyans thinking. You're not serious about some of those things you put out. You're testing the waters, or this.
There's nothing about testing.
This is about 2017. They're just launching their campaigns as opposed to a serious bill.
No, I mean, rest easy. We are going to deal with you guys at 2017. The fact is, the proposals to amend the constitution have now been launched. What have I been saying? I've been saying that this will land in all the assemblies for approval. We'll go into the National Assembly for approval.
Okay.
We'll go into the Senate for approval. If, for some reason, the National Assembly seeks to amend the draft that will be before them, are you saying they are at liberty not to do so? The fact is that this document will be subjected to a legislative process.
All right.
That legislative process includes approving, includes deleting, includes amending.
Mutula, you cannot amend a constitution amendment bill. And my colleague, you have promised, you have practiced law for many years. You know you can't amend a constitutional bill on the floor. I think let's agree. I think the one thing I would concede is that there are some good proposals, Mutula. There are some very good proposals that the country needs. A lot of those can be done by electoral
and
reform.
They're not ridiculous.
I've just said there are some good ones. I haven't gotten to the other ones. The truth of the matter is Parliament, both by the way Jubilee and CORD, in many respects have failed the country in pushing those amendments.
Okay.
So let us see a lot more energy put in making those electoral reforms. It is unfortunate. It would be very unfortunate to put this bill before the assemblies and the national and the county assemblies and the National Assembly. It has enough sweeteners for it to be approved, not on its merits, but on the basis of the sweeteners, and then we will actually go irrevocably to a referendum on these issues.
On the sweeteners.
Yeah, on the sweeteners.
On the sweeteners, all right.
The WDF, for example, the World Development Fund. It is so anti the planning process in the counties, but it's been put there to call in the county assembly
call in the numbers to support.
You see, what I am saying is that if we really do want amendments in the law and amendments for reform, please let us do it.
They can be done in other ways.
As the driver of reform, being not in government, let us see you pushing amendment bills before the House. You fail.
Ask them, the Nairobi County Assembly, because they are the first ones to come up with the World Development Fund, so that then I can tell you the reasons why.
Let me ask this. We need to move on. We need to move on, gentlemen, and talk about accountability. He's talking about some of the good elements. And Maura, to you, I ask this: whether you think each governor shall be required to file quarterly reports of the county expenditures and development priorities with the Senate and the respective county assemblies. We've seen the supremacy battles between the national, the senators and the governors, summoning them not appearing. Is this what we need going forward in the Constitution to ensure accountability, and the money that's going down to the counties, we're sure goes to what Mwananchi needs?
I think it's a good proposal in the sense that now the country doesn't wait for the auditor's report that comes immediately after the expenditures, and probably nothing can be done to safeguard within a financial year. So it's a good proposal. However, what is happening in the current situation, because there are papers that an executive needs to provide with regards to the fiscal strategies and even debt management strategy paper, which most of the counties, by the way, are flouting on those rules. So I think we need to strengthen those accountability systems, and strengthen them in the sense that they need to be accountable every 3 or 4 months in a given financial year.
Again, Sophia, good proposal for accountability. All we need is amend the public finance management
and let's
law.
move on then to another issue.
You have not asked my view of it.
Yes?
I mean,
they have us supported. You want to get your view to support yourself.
What you're saying actually is we don't need a constitutional amendment for that.
You just need to amend the PFM law.
Management Act. That's a good proposal.
Rejoinder quickly.
Sorry, it's not a question of public finance management amendment. It's the fact is you've had a problem with governors. In fact, they are positioned now under Article 96 is that the oversight of the Senate should only be on money that has been collected at counties and not at national. And therefore, you're strengthening the question of accountability. I think he has made the point that for purposes of accountability, we can't just be undertakers and morticians, as my friend Githumiga says. You want to do this in advance, because up to now, and we are in May, the Auditor General has not submitted audited accounts for the previous financial year. So therefore, if we continue like this, it's likely that at the end of 5 years, you will be at the second year in terms of audits and accountability.
September, subject to the protection of minorities and the marginalized in Articles 10, 100 and 232 of the Constitution, no ethnic community shall have more than 15% of appointments in any state organ of the national government, all state agencies and departments of the government. Then B goes on to say, the provisions of this clause shall apply to all appointments at all levels of government. Do you understand that to mean all levels in terms of national and county governments? And is this applicable to say, and put that cap at 15%, and yet then you'll have regions that have one particular ethnic group as the majority, and it's impossible to balance out those numbers?
I think the question of inclusivity has been an ongoing national debate, and it's one that we, as a country, really need to seriously rethink. And looking at that provision, we, of course, understand it to mean both levels of government, that is national and county government. Well, it's possible to implement at national government, with a little bit of tweaking here and there. I don't think it's possible for counties. Yeah, at this stage in time in Kenya. Because if you look at Mandera and the education crisis that they have because of insecurity, nobody is willing to go work there. So how do you say then that only 15% of people from the community in Mandera can work there? I don't think it's possible or plausible for the counties, and it's one of the provisions that we need to rethink. I don't think it's possible. It's very difficult.
Kamodo?
I think again, the reality is that even the Constitution itself recognizes we have a problem of diversity. And I think it is one of those areas that disunites us, because I think it is very difficult when citizens look at the face of institutions and they can only see a particular ethnic group. I think it is not good in terms of building nationhood.
Yes.
I think the question is whether in being this scientific and putting in the Constitution, we can create a crisis. Because if we say at every level, then what are we saying? That in every institution, if you look at management, you must ensure, what should be more concerned is when you look at the face of government generally, you should not have institutions exceeding particular numbers if we want to do that. And the numbers are always very, very dangerous, and so it is to say that, yes, the concern is there, it's a legitimate concern.
Yes.
The question is whether the resolution of it is in putting numbers in the Constitution, or is how do we enforce the principles, how do we ensure that institutions actually that have a constitutional and legal mandate to carry out Kenyan cohesion are carrying out their responsibilities, how do we empower them, how do we hold them accountable? That really is the problem. I'm a bit worried about, yes, the problem is there, but whether there's a solution. And by the way, that is part of the problem of early constitutional amendments, that we may be able to identify the problem, but I don't think we have cooked it enough to know whether what we are proposing is actually going to take us into a worse situation.
Okay.
So I think that is something that requires a little more thinking, but it definitely requires a solution.
All right, and I'll come to you shortly, Mutula, but Samora, to you, it continues to say, Part C, that this provision shall apply to all private enterprises that are contracted by the national government and its agencies. So this is taking it even further.
Even to the parastatals and all. I think when it comes
to... It's worse than parastatals. It says even KTN, which does advertising, if my reading is right, must also ensure that's what I'm saying, that yes, we have a problem in the private sector, but can you actually constitutionally tell me in the private sector I must employ these if I'm going to contract with government? So it's
tricky.
That's a right solution.
I think it's more of a governing principle that should be governed, and then people should be putting it in as a matter of principle that we need to do this, but not. I don't think it's a matter of entrenching it in the Constitution, because in the counties, of course, clearly it's not going to work. In the national, again, are you saying that now we'll be doing arithmetic and finding out what happens again for the current ethnic balances that are there? Are you saying you're going to throw people out so that now you get the balance? So I think it needs to be rethought, and I think it should go in terms of a principle.
Yeah. So you agree it's a problem, but the proposal to fix the problem is not flying. What do you say, Mutula?
Let me tell you, this is a crisis. It's a big crisis. And I have the statistics. As at 2014 June, out of 236,231 civil servants, 115,633, which is 46% of the public force, are only 2 tribes. That is a crisis.
We are agreed on it being a
and
crisis.
Therefore, you see, you point out the issues, and then you look for the solutions.
Okay.
It's not a question of whether you're going to fire people. You're looking prospectively. How are you going to make this country, and a person who is an Oromo, some fellow who lives in some place called Shimoni in Kilifi and Kwale, how will you make this person feel like a Kenyan? You have to make it deliberate.
So do you think this will work in the counties?
There's a trend, which this trend must stop. That every time you remove Mwaura, you must put Kamau. Every time you move Mutula, you must put Musau. Every time you remove Cherotich, you must put another Tanui. That cannot be in a country that wants to move away from tribalism. Trust me, possibly tribalism, other than corruption, is one of the things that plague us. We have pointed out the issues. He has said the national cohesion. The national cohesion has been sending these reports left, right, and center, calling press conferences and issuing public statements. The fact is, since we set up the National Cohesion Commission, what has it done to ensure that then you balance? Because some of these appointments have happened in the Jubilee administration.
All right, so back to the question.
The fact is that how do you deal with it? Because there's no legislation, there's no default. Assuming that I appoint Mwaura and then I appoint Kamau, and what happens after that? There's no penalty. And
Mutula, everyone here agrees with you on the crisis and the challenge. But in terms of the proposal you have when it comes to the counties, there's a challenge in implementing what it is you're suggesting. Do you still stand by that?
Let me tell you, if you go to any county in this republic, you will not find, I'm surprised, but Mandera is not a county comprised of only people from that area. If you go to any other, there are people there. We are trying to encourage Kenyans to live in other counties and get employment.
You know, Sophia.
So that, for example, there are people who are from Makueni and have been employed as executives in Kiambu. It is deliberate to ensure that a person can apply for a job in another county. Why? Because it's lucrative.
Okay.
That it is a deliberate attempt. And let me tell you, in other developed constitutions where they have attempted to deal with what we call backwardness or socio-economic backwardness, they have made it deliberate by putting it in the constitution so that you ensure it complies. In the constitution of India, for example, they have put a threshold of you ensure that these people who are considered socially economic backward must be given 30%. Right. That is the way to do it.
I think what I'm saying, Mutula, I think nobody disagrees with the fact that we have a crisis at that level. The truth of the matter is, between the enactment of the Constitution and now, we have made some movement. There's no question. We've also made some backward steps, which are unfortunate. I think we need to be very careful with the language of numbers. In the County Government Act, for example, right now, we provide that 30% of the employees of any county must not be more from the dominant group. Yeah. The reality is, if you go to the counties, this rule has been flouted across the board. You know, in many places, which means that, and one of the arguments have been, yes, we like to employ, but people don't apply. What are we supposed to do? People are not available. So I'm just saying that the answer with numbers is the solution of numbers is not the solution. And unfortunately, if we entrench it in the Constitution, because that means if we then find this is not working, we then need to go back referendum again. So what we are saying, good proposal, good problem, unfortunate problem, let us find solutions. And let us, in the first instance, find them in the law. If we fail, it will be much easier than finding it in the Constitution.
You are my senior.
Yes.
Give us proposals how you are going to do this in a legislation without finding it having some legal backing, where the Constitution says that this is a country that recognizes everybody, and therefore everybody will be given an equal opportunity. How do you do it in a legislation?
By then the Constitution already says that. So what we now need, you see, the Constitution says diversity must be encouraged. In fact, one of the responsibilities of the Public Service Commission itself is to facilitate diversity in the public service. So what we now need to do is, what is it that we can do in the law to facilitate that happening? And if that is a conversation we were having, And by the way, CSE, we don't generate laws. You bring the laws, we assess them. Yeah. So when that happens, we would like to be part of that conversation.
Okay.
The jump to a constitutional referendum is actually the danger. It is not whether we need no reform. I think that is not the issue here.
All right, let's move on. September, let me put this to you. The presidential election petition, one of the biggest concerns that emerged at the time was the constraints of time that are, of course, entrenched in the Constitution. So you have proposals here that within 14 days after the declaration of the results of a presidential election, any voter may lodge a complaint to a petition of the Supreme Court. There's also 60 days of a fresh election. Do you agree with these timelines, that this would be the way forward in as far as just allowing that the substance of law as well is able to be seen?
So Sophia, and I want to reiterate what I said earlier, that really this bill is about the one election petition in 2013 because of a loss in the general election, and the timelines are put there. If you stretch it to the worst case scenario, we're going to be in an electioneering mood for about 120 days. Because they're saying that after announced declaration of results, you have 14 days to file a petition. After the 14 days, you have another 7 to get responses. Then after the 7, you have another 7 days to basically file replying affidavits. Then after the 7, they're saying 60 days after declaration of the results. If the presidential election results are nullified, they're basically saying we go to elections in 60 days. That's 120 days. That's a third of the year. I think the most important thing is here is let's have mechanisms that for resolving disputes without basically infringing on the rights of the persons petitioning, but let's not have the country in electioneering mood for a very long time, because number one, the economy suffers. Nobody's doing any business. If you look at the stock markets around that period of during election year, nothing is moving. I mean, the stocks always dip. The economy does not perform well. So I want to reiterate that this is still about Cod's loss in the 2013 general election. And
Maura, and I'll come to you. Maura, one of the judges of the Supreme Court said that perhaps if they had more time, the outcome would have been different. So the issue of time has been of concern. But is this too much time? Are we again leaving the country on such an important position, the presidency, vacant, nobody knowing what's going to happen?
I think even taking it to court is the last case scenario. I think what we should be strengthening on is the processes of the elections, the reporting of the results, and having people having confidence in what is being reported. Because at the end of the day, courts should be the last resort. And I agree that it's probably, we might say it's a shortened time with the 7 days. But then if people, so I mean, in the US, people rely on, newsrooms rely on exit polls, and it's fairly acceptable within the parameters of an election, and then a president is actually declared the winner. What we need to do is to strengthen and have confidence in that process, so that we, as much as possible, refrain from going to the courts.
Okay, Mutula.
I want to dissuade this gentleman. He's younger than me, and I want him to think a little, forward, because the purpose of doing legislation, purpose of precedent, is so that you can always look backwards and then anticipate what should happen in future. That is how precedents work. It's not about election laws. You must look in the eye of the public and ask, do you think that the presidential petition in the last general election would have been done better? The question is yes. Instead of rejecting documents because of timelines, etc., you put in a mechanism. I mean, good luck, Jonathan is still in office, isn't he? And they've finished their election, and he's going to be sworn in after some time. The fact is that we must get away from this hype that the minute you have an election, we must have some pomp and party so that people can start celebrating. We can still resolve these processes in such a manner that the country still remains peaceful, you have a good transition, but most importantly, as a principle of law, justice must be not only seen to be done, must seem to be done, a principle that we always practice, so that the person out there, and that is the principle we use. Ask the person out there in the street to answer the question whether they think justice was done. And justice is not losing or winning. Justice is that in the eyes of the public, this process was done properly. Everybody was given an opportunity. Everybody argued their case to the end. Everybody was given sufficient time, and a ruling was given that everybody is happy. So that then you don't have
everybody being happy that
Justice Mutunga saying, okay, this case is dismissed and disappears, and then comes back and says, because he did that because of the timeline.
Yeah, but not everyone will necessarily be happy even if you take 2 years. Let's hear from...
I was going to say that the decision, by the way, that particular clause that shortened the time for resolution of the presidential elections was discussed over a very long time. You asked the committee of experts, and there were very many to's and fro's, including the certainty, how much do you want to allow, especially if the person who has lost the election is the incumbent. How long do you want them to remain in office for so there are very many considerations, and I think as we consider the solution, because obviously the process is very rushed, and I think it can compromise the substantive delivery of justice. And what you could end up with is procedural delivery. I think that there is an issue. But I think we need to look at the pros and the cons of too long a period.
And too short.
And too short a period. And I'm not sure that, again, sufficient thinking in terms, if you look at the numbers that are big, it has assumed that an incumbent will win and the opposition will be the one wanting to,
Isn't that the norm?
Yeah,
it's a norm.
But I would hope not. I mean, if you don't believe in the proposals you're making in terms of that you're going to have a free and fair, your solution is not in the court process. Your solution is ensuring that that process works well, and it might deliver the opposition candidate being the one in office. At that time, he wants the issue resolved yesterday. He doesn't want the government staying there. Then we'll have to come back to the referendum again and say, no, this thing should be 14 days. So what I am saying, let me finish, Mutula. I think the challenges that we had last year, we need to look at them, but let us not be too quick. And that's why I say we may know the problem, but in terms of the solution, let us not be too quick to put a solution that could actually give us a worse problem. That's all I'm saying.
You see, in a petition, and you saw that in one of the petitioners was actually Mheshimiwa Moses Kuria, etc., etc. The petition doesn't have to be the persons who have lost or won. It's also a member of the public. I have a right to petition if there is a law. So therefore, that is what I am talking about. A member of the public, Wanjiko, who is the owner of this constitution, Wanjiko must be able to be given ample opportunity to present their case. You remember there are 4 or 5 petitioners, including the presidential candidate Nazlin Omar, who are not allowed to participate in the last presidential election. Right. Those are the things that you just want to deal with, so that by the end of the day, Nazlin Omar and the people who wanted to participate, Law Society who wanted to participate, can also participate. At the end of the process, if you have a loser, at least the process has been taken care of.
And we should not make a law with a person in mind. The way it's crafted, it's as if it's envisaging a situation whereby the court leader maybe loses, maybe...
you might be a presidential candidate. Take it easy.
I know, that's why I'm saying you need to look at both sides. But I want to take you from what Shege said, that the solution really lies in the strengthening the electoral process, ensuring that we get the proper people in office, ensuring that the systems and structures that we put in place to deliver that result are credible and are strong.
And also ensure...
So that we don't have to go to
court.
And also ensuring that the judges are themselves credible.
Yes.
Because even if you have a process, even if you lengthen it by 6, but you don't believe in the judges, it won't matter. So I'm saying that let us look at the substance of why it is that we have election disputes, and then why is it that we have questions of integrity in the election dispute. I don't think the problem is a time problem.
All right,
Can I say something?
Yes, briefly.
You see, we have had petitions of governors, senators, members of parliament, members of the county assembly, and half of them have been resolved. So therefore, my own view for purposes of the future, and I've told this gentleman he might be a presidential candidate, is that the petitions that have gone all the way to the Supreme Court have all been resolved and everybody is back to business. We want the same principle to apply to a presidential election. And for me, I'm speaking now as a legal practitioner and not as a politician, because I understand processes and you represent clients. You want the process to be acceptable so that even the lawyers themselves can say justice was done.
So I want to give you each a minute, parting short. You've all read the bill. A number of issues still we have not been able to go through this morning. But I'll begin with you, Maura. Looking at it, the issues therein, of course, the MCAs now become again very powerful as everyone tries to dangle that carrot, as we said the other time, and get to have you on their side. But to go to a referendum or not, are these issues, should we have them entrenched now in the Constitution as court is seeking to have?
Well, from the benefit of having had a discussion on the bill, I think before they present it to us, let us have a discussion, and a robust one, where we can have amendments. Because as we agree, the proposal that we can take on earlier before that process. Because once it hits the assemblies, you can't take it back. And then it depends, and the fight is going to happen in the assemblies. If the bill is lost in the assemblies, then it doesn't even need to go to the to Parliament. It is dead, and that's it. But then what happens to the proposals that were progressive, that would die with it? So I think, as a parting shot, let's have a discussion about them, and a sober one. And let's see what we can give and take without necessarily having to take the issue to the assemblies. However, if it comes to the assemblies, we are ready to discuss it without the carrots.
You're not already leaning to one side or the other.
I tell you.
We are ready. You know, we've been through this process.
Yeah.
We've actually had, remember when the clamor started, we actually were proposing to have a specific, a question as assemblies by themselves or as counties.
Okay.
So I think that let us have a better, for purposes of the country and taking it forward, let's have a discussion on the bill.
Yes.
But once it comes to the assemblies, I can assure you we'll have a discussion as assemblies and we'll give them a position that is going to favor the country.
All right, September, the government has been categorical that we do not need to go to a referendum. But can you today at least take some of that blame in as far as you felt Kenyans? Some of these issues can be resolved, and you have the numbers in both houses, and you have not been seen to exercise and work with those numbers to ensure that we don't have to get ourselves in this situation.
Sophie, basically, just to sum it up, what I would say about this bill is that many Kenyans have had varied views on the kind of reforms they want. Reforms is an ongoing process. It's not something that starts and ends at a particular point in time. So basically, we're waiting for, the other bills that are coming up, Pesa Mashinani, Okoa Kenya, maybe someone else will have other bills, and we'll take all those into consideration. And if there are issues we think that are in those bills that we can take up and basically resolve, then we will do that. Some of these issues that they're raising are new for the first time.
But do you consider you failed Kenyans in some ways,
no.
as Jubilee?
As Jubilee, we are really, really committed to implementation of the Constitution. I think that's our priority, and we had it in our manifesto that that we're going to implement this Constitution to the fullest extent. We have constitutional deadlines, August 27, I think, and let's not be rushing to amend the Constitution, and we've not even fully implemented this Constitution that we have. And some of the issues.
Do you ever have a date you fully implemented the Constitution? Will there ever be a day
that we will fully implement a Constitution?
Is that possible?
It's possible.
Isn't it a process?
It's an ongoing process.
Exactly.
But according to basically the schedules and the timelines put, there's a certain threshold that has been put. So we will continue that. But what's basically, to sum it up, is some of the proposals that they have, we can basically sort that in legislation. We don't need to subject Kenyans to another.
Taking you back to your responsibility as Jubilee with the numbers.
As Jubilee and
Mutula,
God, yes.
You can't ask him whether they have failed, because he will tell you they haven't. If you ought to go and ask the parent of a person who lost a child in Garissa whether the Jubilee government has failed them, and they will give you the answer, and it's there in the proposals which you didn't have time to ask us. The idea of having security as a matter discussed even on county level is something for me that is not something we should negotiate just going by the past experience. Two, we shouldn't look at constitutional amendments as to whether Uhuru or Ruto will continue being in power or be removed from power, or Raila will be president, or Kalonzo. It really doesn't matter. As I've said, this gentleman here is capable of becoming the president. The fact is that we amend constitutions for posterity and not for individuals, not for political parties, because who knows, maybe Jubilee coalition will collapse, or Court coalition. The fact is that irrespective of those individuals, the constitutional and the sacred documents that Kenyans passed in 2010 will remain for posterity. I want to go to Makueni, whether I'm senator or not, because I will still be a resident of Makueni, and find development, security, and matters development handled in Makueni, whether I'm senator or not. It's not a political issue. It's a question of saying we have now come to a situation where we want to go back from what was called sessional paper number 10, where only some areas of the country were developed, to developing each country, so that we are proud. When we say najivunia kuwa Mkenya, it's not the same as navumilia kuwa Mkenya. That can only happen if we come to this. And I'm going to ask the persons who hold the majority, and they are proud of it as tyranny, to come to the table. You know, this is actually the time to dialogue, because they said we can now dialogue in Parliament. Do you remember that statement? This is the time for them to walk the talk.
All right, Kamotho, I'll give you the last word, because your commission is charged, the one you sit in, is charged with the implementation of this constitution that CORD is proposing these changes to. We've also seen the governors, Pastor Mashinani, losing some steam there, but still the Ruto said is still on course. Is it time to make those changes? We're about 5 years into this now.
Well, our responsibility is to oversee implementation, including implementation of the clauses that relate to amendments. So for us, we recognize and respect the right of CORD and any other Kenyan to seek amendments. I think the only thing we need to say is that we've lived with this constitution for 3 years. We know some of his 5 years. We know some of it. I should know 5 years. Because my job is going to come to an end. So we have lived with it for 5 years, and I think there are certain challenges that we have seen. Our proposal would be, as much as possible, let us look for those amendments within the proposals that are contained in the Constitution, including legislative reform. Let us then look at what then must be amended, and as much as possible try and seek consensus. Because, Sophie, one of the dangers of the process that we have now is that whether we like it or not, whatever Mutula as a lawyer wants for it to just be a technical process, the reality is that at the end of the day, and we are Kenyans, it is going to be defined as a political process for and against. That cannot be good for the Constitution generally, because, and that is why I said in the beginning, the one document that unites us as Kenyans today is the Constitution. The minute you have half of this country or a third or whatever rejecting that Constitution, it cannot be good unless it is a last resort. So let us do what we need to do to cure these problems before we get to the referendum. And CORD cannot use the excuse of tyranny of numbers. CORD is a responsible minority. Let us see them pushing these changes, and let us see them fail. Kenyans will support them. The same energy with which they're pushing the referendum, change legislative reform, you will be supported. But let us not fall back on the referendum, which is a useful political instrument.
And that is where we must end. My director says we must go. Kamotho Waiganjo, Commissioner with the Commission of the Implementation, CIC.
Thank you.
Yes.